One thing both sides in the independence debate agree on is that next year's referendum will be the biggest political decision Scotland has faced in more than 300 years.
You want independent Scotland to retain pound sterling, right? But if you continue to use currency without UK authority, would Scotland have a lender of last resort?
Well, our proposal is to have a joint arrangement, to have an agreed currency union. You know, sterling is as much our currency as it is England's, but the point I'm making, it's a shared currency at the present moment. It doesn't belong to England, it doesn't belong to George Osborne, the Chancellor. It's part of the assets of the United Kingdom. Now, the point is quite simple. We are prepared to take a share of assets and a share of liabilities, and the liabilities are huge. But if, of course, he was to argue, as he suggests he might, we can't have a share of assets of the common currency, then by definition, we don't have a share of the liabilities, and the liabilities of the United Kingdom are huge. And of course there's many international precedents, for example the breakup of the Soviet Union, where the newly independent countries did not, by negotiation, end up paying the national debt of the Soviet Union. So the national debt belongs to London at the present moment. If they are to persuade us to accept a share, which we're willing to do, then the only basis on which we'll do it is if we have a share of the assets as well. You can't have one without the other. You can't have the bun without the penny. And that is why, incidentally, that after a yes vote for independence, there'll be no difficulty from London about sharing a common currency.
Now, the economy is clearly important. You said an independent Scotland would keep sterling. But doesn't that mean our interest rates would be set by a foreign competitor?
Well, it means that we'd enjoy the same interest rates as sterling rates.
But we would have no say in that, would we?
Well, we don't have any say at the present moment, and neither, incidentally, does the Treasury or the politicians. And that's why the Bank of England was made independent. We have the same.
Would an independent Scotland not want to have its own way of setting these rates?
Well, I think we're better to be in a sterling area. I think that's the best interests of Scotland. The reason I think a sterling area will be successful is, in productivity terms, competitiveness, there's no real difference between Scotland and England. Scotland is more competitive in exports, less so in services, but basically it's the same. So there's no reason why you should have a different currency. It's called an optimal currency area. That would be the argument. But the idea, incidentally, that politicians can command interest rates is a total fallacy, as has been proven time and time again. What you can command as a politician is the direction of your fiscal policy. That's the amount of taxes you raise, how you raise them, and how you spend them. You can command things like investing in the future of education, so as you bring about a more educated, developed and skilled society. You can do that. You can choose, make political choices that people vote for in these areas. But the idea that you can command market interest rates, I think is for the birds. In terms of the currency, I don't think you can control interest rates in the modern world. I think you can control your finances and the fiscal policy of your country, having that 100% control over your taxes you raise and the decisions you make to spend them. Would we have any influence? Well, obviously the Bank of England is operationally independent as a central bank at the present moment. It's not run by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but the Treasury has an observer in the Bank of England Monetary Committee. There's no reason why an independent Scotland Treasury couldn't have an observer on the Bank of England Monetary Committee. But then, of course, it would be as an operationally independent central bank, not under direction of either the UK Treasury or the Scottish Treasury. That's, we think, the best option for Scotland.
Could you clarify for myself and for everyone, I think, what the position of the Scottish National Government would be in terms of the currency if there was a yes vote?
That was part of the Fiscal Commission report, the one with Joe Stiglitz and Jim Mirrlees on it. They recommended that we stick with sterling. The reason that a currency union will work in a way that perhaps the euro illustrates where a currency union has difficulties is quite simple, that the rates of productivity, industrial productivity, export productivity in Scotland and England are very similar. In fact, Scotland over the last 2 years has been marginally higher. In the euro area, of course, you have divergent rates of productivity between the Ruhr Valley and the southern tip of Greece, which can approach 40 or 50%. So there's a huge instability within that currency union. But a currency union between Scotland and England will be it's an optimal currency area, to use the economic jargon. So the advantages of the currency union, in our view, outweigh the disadvantages, and that's the policy. The argument we make in terms of economic progress is the control of taxation.
Can I ask, however, about the people's sovereignty over their currency? Because you'd like to keep, for the time being, the pound in an independent Scotland. Doesn't that mean that, in effect, monetary and fiscal policy would be run from London? You wouldn't have an independent central bank. It would come from the Bank of England, and that you would then have the same subservient relationship to the fiscal power that, for instance, the Greeks are arguing about when it comes to the euro.
Well, there's almost 70 countries across the planet, Andrew, who are either in formal monetary unions or informal monetary arrangements. They are still independent countries. Now, I proposed a monetary union between Scotland and England after independence, because I think that would be a sensible thing to do. I mean, UK politicians gave up setting interest rates in 1997 when, as you rightly say, the Bank of England became independent. But the reason, incidentally, I think a monetary union would be good for England, let's look at it from an English point of view for a second, is that even though Scotland will get the revenues from our share of North Sea oil and gas, it would provide some 30 billion protection for the sterling area, for the UK balance of payments, if you like, which I think very few UK chancellors would want to turn down.